By the 6th day of July, Cedar Crossing had no ice left anywhere. The railroad shipment never arrived, and the hotel's final block vanished before breakfast. Milk soured within hours while fresh meat darkened behind the butcher's empty counter. Dr. Amos Field crowded feverish patients beside windows that offered only hotter air. Then someone remembered the rancher who had spent winter burying ice beneath his barn. Townspeople had called Jonah Reed foolish for storing January where sunlight could never reach. Now wagons filled the road toward his ranch, carrying barrels, blankets, and desperate requests. Jonah opened 2 thick doors, and cold air rolled across the burning yard. Beneath layers of sawdust, hundreds of clear winter blocks still waited in darkness. The whole town suddenly needed the thing it had laughed at for months. The idea began during December of 1884, in Montana Territory. Jonah lived alone 3 miles north of Cedar Crossing on a small cattle ranch. His weathered barn stood against a clay bank beside a spring-fed pond. 6 cattle, 2 horses, and an old dog named Patch shared the property. Jonah had shared it with his wife Mary until the previous summer. A fever took her during 9 days of heat that never released after sunset. Dr. Amos could not stop the illness, and Jonah never blamed him. He still remembered Amos asking for ice to ease Mary's burning discomfort. The nearest supply sat 80 miles away inside a delayed railroad car. By the time it arrived, Mary's chair beside the window was empty. Ice would not have cured her, and both men understood that painful truth. Still, Jonah could not forget needing something abundant in winter and impossible by July. December froze the pond until its surface carried horses without cracking. Jonah watched sunlight shine through blue ice nearly 14 inches thick. Every winter, townspeople skated there before spring erased the entire frozen sheet. Jonah saw something different that year because loss had changed what waste meant. He studied the shaded clay bank beneath his barn's northern wall. Earth remained frozen there long after sunny ground softened beside the corrals. The barn roof blocked afternoon heat, while the bank protected 3 sides. Jonah marked a rectangle beneath the hay floor and began digging before dawn. Each shovel cut into hard clay that resisted him like fired brick. Patch watched from the ladder while loose earth filled the empty cattle wagon. After 4 days, Jonah had opened a chamber 8 feet beneath the barn. He lined the walls with stone and covered the ceiling with heavy cedar beams. A trap door connected the chamber to the shaded aisle above. Jonah believed cold earth and thick walls would preserve whatever winter gave him. He borrowed an ice saw from Walter Knox, the town butcher. Walter asked why 6 cattle required enough ice for an entire hotel. "Summer takes more than people prepare for," Jonah answered without offering Mary's name. Walter shrugged because grief often made sensible men attempt strange projects. Jonah cut the pond into squares before sunrise while temperatures remained lowest. He guided each floating block toward shore using hooked poles and rope. A wooden ramp carried the blocks from sled to barn without lifting them. Horses pulled slowly, while Jonah controlled each sliding piece with a second rope. News reached Cedar Crossing after children followed his loaded sled from the pond. By evening, men gathered near the hotel stove discussing Jonah's underground winter. Silas Crane sold imported ice from a locked shed behind his general store. His summer shipments arrived by rail and earned more than flour during heat waves. Silas claimed Jonah would own nothing but cold mud before April. "Ice belongs to winter," he said. "That is why summer ice costs money." The joke spread until people called Jonah's cellar the January grave. Jonah heard the name while buying nails and said nothing in response. He returned to the pond and cut more blocks beneath a gray morning sky. The first layer rested directly across wooden slats on the cellar floor. Jonah packed clean straw between the blocks and covered their exposed sides. He stacked upward until blue walls filled most of the underground chamber. The final blocks left barely enough room for him to reach the rear. Jonah closed the trap door and felt satisfied by darkness, cold, and silence. Satisfaction lasted until a warm spell arrived during the first week of February. Water seeped beneath the trap door and spread across the barn aisle overnight. Jonah opened the cellar and found meltwater standing several inches above the floor. Lower blocks floated, shifted, and froze together again when night temperatures dropped. Straw soaked with water and stopped protecting the ice from warmer walls. His carefully stacked winter had become one cracked, dirty mass beneath the barn. Walter saw water running downhill and followed it toward the open cellar. The butcher laughed once, then noticed Jonah standing ankle-deep beside the ruined stack. "I suppose summer arrived early," Walter said, immediately regretting the words. Jonah asked whether his borrowed saw was needed back before the pond thawed. Walter looked at the flooded floor and told him to keep it. Jonah spent 2 days chopping fused blocks apart and dragging damaged ice outside. Nearly half his first harvest melted before returning to the frozen pond. The failure exposed a problem cold earth alone could never solve. Ice always melted slightly, and trapped meltwater carried heat through everything it touched. Jonah needed drainage before he needed thicker walls or additional blocks. He rode to the railroad depot seeking anyone familiar with commercial ice storage. Station Master Ada Brooks had supervised freight ice houses before moving west. She inspected Jonah's cellar and immediately pushed her boot into the soaked straw. "You built a cold bucket," she said. "A proper ice house must stay dry." Ada explained that meltwater needed a downhill path away from the stored blocks. Air also needed control because open ventilation carried summer heat inside. She recommended sawdust because dry wood fibers trapped still air better than straw. Jonah asked why Silas had never mentioned any of those details. Ada smiled and reminded him Silas preferred customers over competitors. Jonah removed the remaining ice and lifted every wet board from the floor. He cut a narrow drain through the clay toward the northern ravine. Flat stones lined the channel, while a wooden grate supported ice above it. Meltwater could now escape without touching the stacked blocks or surrounding insulation. Jonah built a second inner wall and filled the space with dry sawdust. 2 fitted doors created a small chamber between summer air and stored winter. A short vent remained open during freezing weather and closed when spring warmed. Ada tested each corner with a lantern flame, searching for unwanted drafts. The flame leaned near one ceiling joint where warm barn air entered freely. Jonah sealed the gap with felt, clay, and another strip of cedar. He recorded every change inside Mary's old household account book. Failure became easier to face once each mistake produced a written correction. The pond remained frozen long enough for Jonah to begin a second harvest. This time, Ada helped mark uniform blocks before the saw entered the ice. Equal shapes stacked tighter and left fewer warm spaces between their edges. Walter brought 2 ranch hands after claiming he only wanted his saw returned. Together they moved 4 times more ice than Jonah had moved alone. Each layer received dry sawdust along its edges and across the outer walls. The blocks never touched soil, wet straw, or the warmer stone lining. Jonah left narrow working space near the front instead of filling every corner. He covered the final stack beneath almost 2 feet of dry sawdust. When the doors closed, the cellar held more than 300 winter blocks. Silas visited after hearing Walter had helped create a possible summer competitor. He inspected the double doors, drainage outlet, and sawdust piled beside the barn. "You spent good timber preserving free water," he said with practiced amusement. Jonah asked how much Silas charged when July trains arrived late. The merchant stopped smiling because the answer changed with every desperate customer. Silas offered $40 for the entire cellar before seeing whether it worked. Jonah refused because money could not replace winter after winter had already passed. "By June, you will own sawdust soup," Silas predicted before riding away. Jonah wrote the prediction beneath Ada's drainage measurements inside Mary's book. March softened the pond, and the last harvest sled returned empty. Sunlight reached the barn longer each day while snow retreated uphill. Jonah checked only the drain because opening doors would release stored cold unnecessarily. Clear meltwater dripped slowly into the ravine without pooling beneath the floor. The cellar remained silent, dry, and colder than any room above ground. Winter had ended outside, but beneath Jonah's barn it had only gone dark. April brought mud, newborn calves, and the first warm afternoons of spring. Jonah resisted opening the cellar until his old milk cow became sick. Her calf refused ordinary feed and needed fresh milk from Walter's dairy cow. The daily trip consumed hours, while warm milk spoiled before the calf finished it. Jonah opened the outer door and waited for trapped heat to settle behind him. Cold air met his face when the inner door finally moved. He removed sawdust from one corner and struck hard blue ice beneath it. The block had rounded slightly, but most of its winter shape remained. Jonah carried a small piece upstairs and packed it around the milk jar. The milk stayed cool through evening, and the hungry calf drank safely. Ice did not heal the cow, but it protected food until she recovered. Jonah recorded the removed weight, outdoor temperature, and visible loss from the block. Ada compared his figures with freight ice houses and found the loss unusually low. The shaded bank and barn roof were performing as much work as sawdust. Walter asked for 1 block when his smokehouse cooling pit failed unexpectedly. Jonah agreed after Walter brought a wooden box packed with fresh sawdust. They opened both cellar doors for less than 1 measured minute. Walter wrapped the block and carried it beneath blankets toward town. The ice kept a side of beef cool until smokehouse repairs were completed. Walter paid Jonah, then denied buying anything when Silas questioned the wet wagon. May warmed rapidly, filling Cedar Crossing with dust, flies, and sour kitchen smells. Silas's first railroad ice shipment arrived inside a sawdust-packed freight car. He displayed clear blocks behind his store and charged according to each customer's urgency. Hotels paid first, saloons paid more, and ordinary families bought dripping fragments. Jonah sold nothing publicly because he wanted evidence before risking his entire reserve. He opened the cellar once weekly and measured the front row carefully. Block edges softened, but the stack remained solid beneath dry insulation. Meltwater continued leaving through the drain without warming the raised wooden floor. Jonah found one problem where the outer door faced the barn aisle. Afternoon air entered whenever horses passed and stirred heat through the small chamber. He built a shaded side entrance through the clay bank instead. The new passage opened northward and kept both doors away from barn heat. A canvas curtain between them slowed warm air during every necessary entry. Ada approved the change after her lantern flame remained straight beside each seam. Jonah nailed the original trapdoor shut and covered it with additional hay. The project now looked less foolish, which made jokes sharper among stubborn men. Silas began calling Jonah the winter mole whenever customers gathered near his counter. He claimed loneliness had driven the rancher underground with frozen company. Jonah ignored him until Silas mentioned Mary while laughing beside the hotel. "Some men preserve ice because they cannot preserve what really matters," Silas said. The street quieted because even men enjoying the joke recognized its cruelty. Jonah crossed the road and stopped close enough to see Silas reconsider. "Mary died," Jonah said. "Nothing I build pretends otherwise." He returned to his wagon before anger turned grief into something cheaper. Silas offered no apology, but he never used Mary's name again. Early June brought Dr. Amos to Jonah's ranch, carrying a wooden medical chest. Several bottled mixtures inside spoiled quickly whenever his office became hot. He also needed cool cloths for patients suffering fever or heat exhaustion. Jonah showed him the remaining stack without claiming ice could cure either condition. More than 4/5 of the original harvest still remained beneath the sawdust. Amos stood in the cold chamber and remembered Mary's final week beside him. "She would have called this excessive," he said. "Then she would have helped." Jonah smiled because Amos had remembered the exact shape of her kindness. They arranged one weekly medical delivery inside Jonah's smallest insulated box. Amos paid only for cutting and transport because Jonah refused money for the clinic. That agreement became the first written priority inside Mary's old account book: clinic first, infant second, perishable food third, and comfort after survival. Jonah never expected the list to govern more than a few summer requests. By mid-June, daytime temperatures reached levels usually reserved for late July. Grass curled beside the roads while cattle crowded shadows too narrow for them. Jonah opened the cellar during the hottest afternoon to test its true protection. Cold vapor touched his boots while solid blocks rose behind him in darkness. Silas's prediction remained written in the book, directly above June's measurements. The cellar held no sawdust soup, only winter waiting beneath a summer barn. Would you have stored 300 ice blocks after watching the first harvest fail? Share your answer below, and subscribe before Cedar Crossing faces its hottest July. July arrived with heat that turned roof nails painful before breakfast. Night offered little relief because warm wind continued moving across the open plains. Silas sold his railroad ice faster than workers could unload each freight car. The hotel filled bathtubs with blocks, while saloons chilled drinks behind locked doors. Families purchased small pieces for milk, butter, medicine, and overheated children. Jonah continued measured clinic deliveries and refused private offers from wealthy ranchers. He believed Silas's rail supply could serve town, while his reserve protected emergencies. That belief ended when a wildfire reached the railroad trestle east of Cedar Crossing. Flames damaged supporting timbers and stopped every westbound freight train before dawn. The next ice car waited beyond the burned bridge beneath an equally hot sun. Railroad crews promised repairs, but nobody could promise when freight would move again. Silas counted 17 remaining blocks inside his locked shed that morning. He raised prices immediately because demand had become larger than his supply. Walter paid for 4 blocks to protect meat already hanging inside his cooler. The hotel purchased 5 before ordinary families learned the railroad had stopped. Amos arrived too late and found only wet sawdust beneath empty hooks. He needed ice for 3 heat-struck workers lying inside the clinic. Silas offered dripping fragments, but Amos required more than leftovers could provide. Ada harnessed the depot horse while Amos loaded his insulated medical box. They rode north toward the ranch everyone suddenly remembered before noon. Jonah saw the wagon dust and opened the shaded outer door before they arrived. Amos explained the trestle fire, empty storehouse, and crowded clinic in one breath. Jonah checked the cellar ledger and estimated how much heat remained before autumn. The reserve looked large, but an entire town could consume it within days. He removed 6 blocks and covered the open stack immediately with fresh sawdust. Amos asked what payment Jonah wanted after the town had mocked him. "Keep people alive long enough to complain again," Jonah answered while closing the doors. The clinic delivery lasted until evening, when 5 additional patients arrived. Walter's cooler warmed next, threatening meat meant for nearly every household. Boarding house milk soured, butter softened, and eggs spoiled before supper. Parents began walking toward Jonah's ranch carrying jars wrapped inside damp blankets. Ranchers followed with requests for dairy, injured animals, and expensive breeding stock. By sunset, wagons lined the road beneath dust glowing red in western light. Jonah stood before the barn and saw Cedar Crossing waiting inside his yard. Silas arrived last, carrying the same polished cash box used during winter sales. He offered to purchase the cellar, its contents, and Jonah's entire summer supply. "I know distribution," Silas argued. "You know how to keep ice." Jonah asked how much the clinic would pay under Silas's distribution. The merchant avoided answering because desperate businesses could always pay more. Jonah opened Mary's account book and showed everyone the priority list: clinic, infants, essential food, and then every other request according to need. Saloons received nothing, while patients crowded cots inside Amos's stifling rooms. Silas called the system charity until Ada reminded him winter ice had cost labor. Jonah charged businesses ordinary winter labor rates and supplied the clinic without charge. Every household received small amounts for milk, medicine, or a sick family member. Walter organized wagons while Ada measured boxes and recorded their destinations. Jonah limited cellar openings to dawn and evening because every entrance admitted heat. People complained until he showed them water dripping faster after each open door. Sawdust-filled boxes carried blocks toward town beneath canvas and wool blankets. Even careful transport sacrificed ice, leaving wet trails along the baked road. By the second evening, Cedar Crossing depended entirely on Jonah's underground winter. The cellar still appeared full, but its front rows had disappeared rapidly. Jonah measured the remaining stack and found the heat consuming more than expected. The town needed his ice, but careless need could destroy the reserve itself. The third morning began with Amos requesting twice the previous medical allowance. Heat had filled his clinic with railroad workers, children, and elderly residents. Cool cloths eased suffering, while chilled water helped patients drink without immediate nausea. Ice offered relief and protected supplies, but rest and careful nursing still mattered. Jonah approved the larger share and reduced every commercial delivery by half. Walter protested until Amos carried an unconscious rail worker past his wagon. The butcher lowered his order and offered smoked meat instead of fresh cut. Silas reopened his empty ice shed as a distribution room without charging rent. Ada covered its walls with leftover sawdust sacks to slow melting during sorting. Jonah's winter knowledge began spreading because one cellar could not serve everyone alone. At noon, Patch began scratching near the exterior drain below the barn. Jonah followed and found no meltwater dripping from the outlet pipe. The cellar could not stop melting completely, so a dry outlet meant trouble. He opened the inner door and heard water moving beneath the wooden floor. Sawdust had entered the channel and formed a plug inside the clay bank. Meltwater rose around the lower blocks, carrying warmth through the entire front stack. The same failure that ruined Jonah's first harvest had returned during the emergency. Removing ice from above would require hours with both doors standing open. Jonah chose the outside drain, though its tunnel barely admitted his shoulders. Ada tied a rope around his waist while Walter held the other end. Jonah crawled into damp darkness carrying an iron rod and a shielded lantern. Cool mud pressed beneath him while trapped water whispered beyond the blockage. He drove the rod through packed sawdust and felt pressure seize its tip. The plug released suddenly, sending filthy meltwater hard against his chest. Walter pulled the rope while water carried Jonah backward through the narrow tunnel. He emerged coughing mud, still gripping the rod inside one bleeding hand. Behind him, meltwater poured freely into the ravine and away from stored ice. Ada replaced the simple outlet screen with layered wire and a removable wooden grate. Jonah added daily drain inspection beside medical deliveries inside Mary's account book. The repair saved the front stack, but several lower blocks had already disappeared. That afternoon, Telegraph News reported the railroad bridge would need another week. Cedar Crossing possessed perhaps 4 days of ice at the current rate. Jonah gathered Amos, Ada, Walter, and Silas beneath the shaded barn roof. They listed every use and separated convenience from something that protected life. Saloons remained excluded, while restaurants shifted toward dried food and hot meals. Walter smoked remaining meat and slaughtered nothing that could not be preserved immediately. Families combined milk storage, reducing the number of small boxes losing cold separately. Ada built a shared insulated chest inside the depot's thickest stone room. Silas surrendered hotel blankets and every sawdust sack remaining behind his store. Careful use stretched Jonah's estimate from 4 days toward nearly 7. The heat answered by climbing higher on the 4th afternoon. Horses stopped sweating, birds disappeared, and metal tools burned unprotected hands. Amos's clinic became dangerous because its brick walls held heat after sunset. Patients lay across every floor while outside air offered no relief. Jonah studied the barn aisle directly above the underground ice chamber. The sealed trapdoor beneath hay separated that shaded space from stored cold. Opening it would cool the aisle, but every useful degree would melt ice faster. Amos had patients who might not survive another afternoon inside the clinic. Jonah removed the hay, opened the old trapdoor slightly, and felt cold rise. He stopped the opening with timber, leaving a controlled gap no wider than his hand. Ada opened high barn windows so rising heat could escape above the patients. Walter cleared stalls while wagons carried the weakest people from town. The Lone Rancher's barn became Cedar Crossing's coolest public room before mid-afternoon. Cold air did not transform it into winter, but the difference became immediate. Children stopped crying, exhausted workers drank, and Amos finally sat down. Jonah watched condensation gather beside the trapdoor and calculated the hidden cost below. Each hour of relief consumed part of the reserve meant for following days. He closed the opening after sunset and returned patients to cooler town rooms. The cellar had lost 30 additional blocks, far more than ordinary distribution required. Mary's priority list offered no answer when every remaining choice protected someone. Silas found Jonah alone beside the open account book after midnight. The merchant placed his winter cash box on the table without opening it. "I priced ice by desperation," he admitted. "You measured it by need." Jonah asked whether confession could rebuild the burned railroad bridge before morning. Silas accepted the anger and offered something more useful than another apology. His stone warehouse had a deep cellar, thick doors, and unused northern windows. They could move patients there and preserve Jonah's ice inside shared insulated chests. Moving ice cost less cold than cooling an entire barn throughout another day. Before sunrise, volunteers emptied Silas's warehouse and covered its cellar walls. Ada directed sawdust packing, while Walter built racks above the stone floor. Jonah delivered 40 blocks during the coolest hour before dawn. Amos arranged patients above the shared ice chests rather than beside open blocks. Cool air remained trapped longer, reducing melt while easing the room's worst heat. The new ward used less than half the ice Jonah's barn had consumed. On the 5th day, Silas collapsed while carrying water down the warehouse stairs. Amos recognized heat exhaustion and ordered him onto the nearest empty cot. Jonah packed one small piece of ice inside a damp cloth for him. Silas opened his eyes and saw the rancher he had mocked holding it. "Charge whatever you want," he whispered before understanding how foolish it sounded. Jonah placed the cash box beneath Silas's cot and closed its polished lid. "You are on the clinic list now," he said. "The price is the same." By the 6th evening, only the deepest rear rows remained beneath Jonah's barn. The blocks were harder to reach, requiring longer openings and additional labor. Walter suggested removing everything before access consumed more ice than careful storage saved. Ada disagreed because the warehouse could not protect the entire remaining reserve. Jonah chose one final large transfer and left 2 emergency rows underground. Every person loading sleds understood no second winter waited behind those blocks. They worked quickly, closed each door, and replaced every layer of sawdust immediately. The warehouse received enough ice for 2 more days of strict medical use. That night, wind shifted north and carried the first cool air in weeks. Temperatures fell slowly, though nobody trusted relief until dawn arrived cloudy. The railroad bridge reopened the following afternoon under crews working without rest. A freight car filled with shrinking ice blocks reached Cedar Crossing before sunset. People cheered the train, then remembered who had carried them until it arrived. Jonah's cellar still held 27 blocks beneath its final sawdust wall. He had stored more than ice because knowledge had preserved each useful piece. Cedar Crossing lost food and livestock, but its heat-struck patients received vital relief. Amos credited water, shade, rest, nursing, and ice used with careful judgment. Jonah corrected anyone claiming frozen blocks had worked as a miraculous cure. Ice had bought comfort, preserved supplies, and given exhausted bodies cooler hours. The following winter, townspeople gathered at Jonah's pond before sunrise without laughing. Silas brought wagons, Walter brought saws, and Ada carried the measurement book. Together, they built a public ice house against the shaded hill above town. Its raised floor drained downhill, while double walls held dry sawdust around stacked blocks. 2 doors limited warm air, and a removable screen protected the meltwater channel. Mary's priority list hung beside the entrance inside a simple wooden frame. The clinic received its reserve first, before hotels, saloons, ranches, or private homes. Silas managed accounts, but the town council fixed prices before summer demand arrived. Walter stopped calling the underground room a grave after storing his first winter block. Ada called it a lesson built from drainage, darkness, and one corrected failure. Jonah returned to his ranch after every community harvest ended. He still kept a private reserve beneath the barn for animals and emergencies. Patch slept near the north door whenever winter blocks filled the cellar again. Mary's account book remained on its hook, swollen slightly from years of damp hands. Jonah never believed storing ice could change what happened during her final summer. He built because memory could become preparation without pretending loss never happened. Cedar Crossing mocked him for burying winter until summer exposed the wisdom below. By July, the whole town needed the cold one lonely rancher had protected. Would you have trusted Jonah's underground ice house? Rate his decision from 0 to 10. Share where you are watching from, and subscribe to Wild West Lifestyle for more frontier stories.